I always tell people, like, first of all, when people are like, we have an attorney on our board, and I'm always like, that's great. That's, I wish more people had an attorney on the board. But I said, nonprofit attorneys are kind of like thumb surgeons. Not everyone needs us, but when you do, you really, really need us, need our help. So, I mean, I think if there's an organization who's looking for a nonprofit attorney, I think there's some easy ways to learn about someone before you pick up the phone. Social media is great.
You're listening to the Nonprofit Counsel podcast with host May Harris.
My guest today is Jacob Zerkie, who's a senior tax associate at Michael Best Friedrich in Chicago, Illinois. He's been representing nonprofit organizations for over a decade, and it's really a pleasure to have you join us today, Jacob. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, so maybe you can share a little bit about how you got into representing nonprofit organizations. It's kind of a niche within another niche. So really what led you to this practice?
Yeah. And can I just share about like a career journey?
Absolutely.
A little bit? Yeah.
Yes.
So I think, during law school, I thought I had a job lined up after. So I thought I had a federal clerkship. I was in the final round of interviews, very overly confident, and I didn't get it. And I was devastated. And so that left me in my spring semester, my 3.0 year. I was applying to dozens and dozens of jobs online. This is 2012. So the economy is like recovering, but not recovered. And then I was so discouraged. And a friend had a coffee with me. He's like, Jake, you are doing it all wrong. He's like, this is not how you get jobs today. And that was news to me because I had no idea. So he said, you need to be meeting people, having conversations with real people and in the industry that you want to work in. And so that started me, a lowly 3L from January to May, my last semester. I went to Chicago from Indiana, where I was in law school, every Friday. And I had about 2 or 3 coffees and lunches every Friday with anyone who would meet with me, friends of friends, anybody. And through that process, I met someone through actually my pastor of my church who had a small practice devoted to being general counsel to these small and mid-sized nonprofits. And I avoided all tax classes in law school. It wasn't my thing. But then after about a year or two, I thought, you know what? These organizations are doing incredible things. This is interesting work. It doesn't seem to me to be tax work, or else I wouldn't like it. And that's so it's kind of an accident, actually. I stumbled in and then I ended up really, really liking it.
We have very similar career paths, but yeah, it's like when you think, I actually in law school, I had to take a tax class. I went to the University of San Diego, but it was like personal income tax. And I was never, no.
Right.
But you're right. Nonprofit law has a whole bunch of tax to it, but it's not what people would traditionally think of as tax law or tax practice. Right. Right.
And I think the law firms, they put you in the tax group because they don't know what to do with you. You're not really, you're kind of corporate, you're kind of tax. And so, but I think you're right. There's definitely tax components, but I would say it's more fun than that. No offense to our pure tax colleagues listening.
I absolutely agree. So that got your foot in the door. And then what? You've kind of advanced quite a bit in your career. So what does your practice look like now at Michael Best Friedrich?
I spent a couple years in an accounting firm context after my first job. And in that capacity was exposed to kind of the inner workings of the Form 990, the Form 990 PF, 990T on the preparation side, the accounting side. And after a few years, I think I should have known, but learned, I really enjoy the legal side more, kind of the drafting and the kind of the advising, even though that happens in the accounting firm also. But so the last, for the last 6 years or so, I've been serving, in a probably similar way that May does. So this was very intimidating, by the way, being on the call with May Harris here.
Don't say that.
But yeah, serve as counsel to nonprofit organizations, all kinds. Could be 501c3, C4s, maybe a few C6s and things like that. all the way from, formation throughout a life cycle, which hopefully we don't see the dissolution, but sometimes that makes sense. And yeah, my job I see is just, you have legal needs, you have non-legal needs, and hopefully, any attorney, but a nonprofit attorney, we can help, with whatever comes through the door.
Right. Well, so I think if you are anything like me and the other attorneys that work with me at For Purpose Law Group, one of the primary reasons that we enjoy our work so much is it's almost like we get to be that knowledgeable partner and be a part of what these organizations are doing, whether they're C3, C4, C6s, it doesn't matter. They're all just so passionate about what they do, and we get to have just a little piece of that. Do you feel the same?
Yeah. I was thinking about it kind of before this call, and I think we all rub shoulders with nonprofits every single day, or at least every single week. And I think that's what makes what we do really rewarding is, so if you're part of a faith community, if you volunteer, if you serve on a board, if your kids are in a school or private school or something, we are the beneficiaries of all kinds of nonprofits all the time. And I think you're right that being able to advise nonprofit clients, it's easy to feel like our boots aren't on the ground per se, but we get to help other people do the work that maybe we would have done in another life, or that's very rewarding.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. So, you advise, as do I, nonprofit organizations from inception to dissolution, like you said, and everything in between. And I do think I'm seeing a lot more mergers and dissolutions in the past 12 to 18 months than are typical. And I think that, is definitely a result of COVID and, a horrible thing that the whole sector went through. But what kind of challenges are you observing in your practice? Do you kind of see the same thing, or are you seeing some other challenges?
Yeah, I would say on that point, that's a really good point. I think directly related to the maybe COVID and maybe giving being down, or that government money running out. I think we have a lot of clients asking about their restricted funds, or maybe whether they can tap into endowment funds, restricted funds. And if not, what's the process for modifying, or like, how can we get to this big pot of money? I think everyone sees it on their books, their financials, and we've just had a lot of questions around trying to access endowment funds. And so we try to walk through that process. I think another topic that has been top of mind for a lot of our nonprofit clients came after the Supreme Court decision related to affirmative action.
Correct.
And obviously there was a lot of things we're waiting on in terms of guidance from the IRS or other players here, but because I think we're seeing some litigation that's around education, that's broader than education. I think folks in the charitable sector are wondering, how does this impact my scholarship program, my DEI programs? I'm just a funder, or I'm operating them. And so we do the best we can to try to walk through risk analysis with those questions.
Which can be a little difficult to do when you don't really know how it's going to play out and the guidance hasn't been released yet, right? It's
terrible. Yeah. For attorney, I mean, I think we feel the stress too of the uncertainty of it, and it makes it really hard to. I think the goal, is to get a read on the risk tolerance of organizations, and how passionate are you and how much risk are you willing to take on with the lack of guidance that we have, which is hard to do.
Right. Well, and that can really also depend upon the size and the maturity of the organization you're advising as well. I mean, I think the kind of larger, more established, mature organizations are typically who you're advising in that area. But that doesn't mean that the small to medium-sized nonprofits can necessarily ignore it. You mentioned one thing that some of my clients are really asking about, which is how does it impact their DEI policy, diversity, equity, inclusion. And now I think there's justice at the end of some, belonging, they're modifying that. But how should they approach those policies in light of the Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, no, and they're really good questions. And I think, unfortunately, waiting is not always a good answer, but I think that's where many of us feel we are in terms of waiting to see how litigation plays out, waiting hopefully for the IRS to help charitable organizations understand what the expectation is there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so let's move on a little bit about when a nonprofit comes to a realization, or, managers, leaders of a nonprofit organization come to the realization that as they mature, perhaps the attorney that has sat on their board from inception and now is retired and whatever, and they actually do need real legal advice. So what do you believe those nonprofits that are now transitioning to full maturity and do need some legal guidance should look for when they're looking at a professional?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. I always tell people, like, first of all, when people are like, we have an attorney on our board, and I'm always like, that's great. That's, I wish more people had an attorney on the board. But I said, nonprofit attorneys are kind of like thumb surgeons. Not everyone needs us, but when you do, you really, really need us, need our help. So, I think if there's an organization who's looking for a nonprofit attorney, I think there's some easy ways to learn about someone before you pick up the phone. Social media is great. Like May has an incredible blog, articles that she's writing. So you can already know something about, for instance, about May and her practice without ever having talked to her. The certain topics that she, you may know about, or LinkedIn. It's maybe even a quick one too. Easy to follow somebody and just say, like, what do they know? What are they talking about? Do these issues impact my organization? And then the final best one is just having a call or a coffee. And I think a lot of attorneys, nonprofit attorneys or otherwise, would be thrilled if someone sent me an email to say, hey, I read your article and it was so whatever. I'd love to talk about it over coffee. Be like, oh my gosh, someone read something I wrote. This is incredible. But I think having that conversation, because like someone's expertise is one thing, but also you have to like and get along with, your attorney. And so I think having that first conversation to say, like, is this a good fit for you? Is this a good fit for me? Do I have the experience that you need? Because if not, I'm not going to take on that client. If I hear what you need, maybe what I can do is connect you to other people who can help. But I think having that call and a coffee or something to say, or is this a good fit for both of us?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned, social media and LinkedIn, which is how we really truly first got connected. And you have done one of my favorite series on LinkedIn, which is, what is the actual title? I just know it's The Office and what the office can teach nonprofits, or something along that. The Office with Steve Carell, obviously, the sitcom.
Yeah. And you're very kind to mention that. It was just kind of it's an experiment, I guess. I watched an Office episode, and, attorneys and others, we work maybe more than others. And then at the end of the day, I'm doing dishes and I watch The Office, and that's just kind of what I do most nights. And one day I was like, that is exactly what nonprofits are dealing with. And I can't remember my first one. I call it Nonprofit Office Wisdom.
Yes.
is my title. But no, May. So yeah, I'll just be watching, and I would say, every other week I get an episode that I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much.
There's a huge application, right?
Yeah. Let's see how this applies to our nonprofit clients. And I think, for me, LinkedIn, it's fun. Honestly, yeah, it's the way you and I were introduced to each other. I've used it to find referral sources from like nonprofit attorneys on the West Coast, because I sit in Chicago. But The Office, I think it's professional, but it's also social. It's social media. And so I found that folks, they come for nuggets of, substance based on nonprofit topics, but people love to laugh, and people just love to like find out how their favorite TV show may have some remote application to what, you're doing in fundraising or whatever, charitable events and things like that. So very fun. Thanks for the shout out.
Of course, any listener should absolutely check out Jacob's LinkedIn profile. And the reason I bring it up is it kind of comes full circle when you're looking for guidance and professional legal representation, and you look at social media. That's one element, but we all come across as ultra uber professional. That's one thing I loved about you. You brought some humanity even to LinkedIn. You're professional, but your advisors as a nonprofit leader are humans. We're real people too. We have hopes, dreams, aspirations, and we're excited to be a part of your mission. So when you sit down for that coffee or you pick up the phone and talk to a potential attorney, relate to them on a personal level, and you'll be way ahead of the game.
Yeah, no, I love it. We may be lawyers for our job, but I think social media is a great way to see like what else is May doing, what else is Jake doing, and I try to keep it relatively professional, but you can get a glimpse of other things. So I think it's a great way to relate to your attorneys, like you said.
Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Let's see. Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think just one, and this could have been a prior question that you asked, and I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think one big difference between, let's say, a nonprofit attorney and a regular attorney is there's so much overlap, right? There's so much overlap with like insurance or immigration or contracts, have those things in common. But I think it's time to pick up the phone when you have issues that are unique to nonprofits, like the fundraising, the endowment, the tax exemption. And that's where a few of us like May and myself have had the privilege to be able to spend most of our time. And I think that's how I feel about it, is I've been lucky in my 10 years to be able to spend my working hours in this, what we call nonprofit law. This is a lot of fun. But no, thanks to May. And also a resource, if you're a nonprofit leader listening, you should check out the other podcasts. I was listening to many of them this past week on accounting, on advocacy and others. I think it's a great free resource, May. Not a lot of this in the nonprofit world. So I think it's very, very much needed.
But I will add one thing to what you said when you know it's time to pick up the phone, when you hire your first person. So your executive compensation can be one of the biggest red flags to charity regulators. And that's often one of the first things you do is start paying, your founder or your executive director. And if you just go to any attorney, or Rocket Lawyer, I love those, or LegalZooms, I can get a great employment agreement off of that, or independent contractor agreement, because I'm just going to pay them as an independent contractor. That's also a problem. Kind of unique to nonprofits, specifically 501c3s, is there's a whole bunch of attention on executive compensation. So even that early on in your maturity, you might want to be picking up the phone and talking to a nonprofit attorney who knows what problems and pitfalls are there for 501c3s that aren't there for other businesses.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jake. Should I call you Jake or Jacob? Is it Jake?
Either one is totally fine.
Because you referred to yourself as Jake, so I'm like, I'm going to call him Jake. We're on that basis. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure speaking with you.
No, thanks, May, for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Counsel podcast. Are you ready to lead with clarity and confidence? Head to nonprofitcounsel.com to find the tools you need to start smart, lead strong, and create lasting impact.